The awakening giant. The Ardonian fleet admiral, Vexlor, stood on the command bridge of his dreadnought, watching the destruction of yet another resistance outpost through the massive view screen. Debris scattered across the starfield as the last of the defensive platforms collapsed into clouds of superheated gas and twisted metal. Another victory for the Hegemony. His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Threll, announced with practiced formality. The Resistance loses their final staging area in the Orion Arm. Vexlor didn't respond immediately. After 3 decades of pushing the Allied species back across 17 sectors, victories had become routine, expected. The Hegemony's technological superiority and the sheer size of their armada made the outcome of this war inevitable. Still, the Resistance fought on, desperate and increasingly disorganized. Any survivors? Vexlor finally asked. A few transport ships escaped toward the Sol system, Threll replied. Not worth pursuing. That sector remains neutral. Vexlor's attention sharpened. Sol. That's the human system, correct? Yes, Admiral. They've maintained their isolation since the war began. Primitive species only achieved faster than light travel a century ago. Their technology is generations behind ours. The Admiral turned from the view screen, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. Yet the Resistance seeks refuge there. Interesting. Intelligence suggests it's merely proximity. Admiral, the humans have shown no interest in galactic politics. Their military capabilities are minimal, and they've refused all Resistance requests for alliance. Prepare a diplomatic envoy, Vexlor ordered. It's time we formally brought Sol into the Hegemony's protection. We can't allow the Resistance to establish a foothold there, no matter how insignificant the system might be. Meanwhile, on Earth, in the underground complex beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Maya Chen reviewed the desperate transmission from the Resistance vessels limping into the solar system. They've lost everything at Proxima Station, she informed the assembled Joint Chiefs of Staff. The Hegemony has complete control of our neighboring sector now. Admiral Jackson, head of the Space Force, leaned forward. How many refugees? 3 transport ships, approximately 2,000 civilians and soldiers, mostly Eridani and Centauri species. The room fell silent. For 50 years, Earth had watched the distant war, officially maintaining neutrality while secretly preparing. When humanity had first achieved interstellar flight and encountered the wider galactic community, they'd found a civilization torn by conflict. The Ardonian Hegemony, an empire spanning thousands of worlds, was systematically conquering independent systems and subjugating dozens of species under their rigid control. We've received an additional transmission, General Chen continued. The Hegemony is sending an envoy to Earth. They're demanding we surrender the refugees and formally join their empire. So the choice has been made for us, said President Karim, who had been silently observing from the head of the table. The moment they decided to pursue refugees into our system, they'd forced our hand. Are we ready? Asked the Secretary of Defense. Admiral Jackson nodded grimly. Project Lazarus is operational. The fleet is at 94% capacity. Our orbital defense grid can be fully activated within 3 hours. Then it's time, President Karim said, rising to his feet. Humanity can no longer stand aside. Authorize full military mobilization. Operation Thunderbolt begins now. For decades, Earth had projected an image of technological inferiority and military weakness, a carefully constructed facade. Behind this mask, humanity had been building, innovating, and preparing, learning from the mistakes that had led other species to defeat against the Hegemony's forces. When the Ardonian diplomatic vessel entered the solar system 2 days later, escorted by a single warship, a deliberate show of their overwhelming confidence, they expected to find a primitive planet ready to surrender. Instead, they encountered silence. No response to communications, no defensive posture, nothing. Confused by the lack of reaction, the Ardonian captain ordered his ships closer to Earth, passing the orbit of Mars. It was there that humanity revealed its first surprise. Quantum sensors aboard the Ardonian warship suddenly detected energy signatures materializing around them. Within seconds, 30 Earth vessels emerged from previously undetectable stealth fields, surrounding the Hegemony ships in a perfect sphere of firepower. Ardonian vessels came the transmission from the Earth flagship Prometheus. "This is Admiral Sophia Jackson of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your forces have violated sovereign Earth space while pursuing refugees. You will power down your weapons systems immediately." The Ardonian captain, stunned by the unexpected show of force, quickly recovered his composure. "This is Captain Zern of the Hegemony. Your primitive vessels pose no threat to Ardonian technology. Stand down or face obliteration." The response was immediate, not with words, but action. The Earth fleet didn't use conventional energy weapons as the Ardonians expected. Instead, they deployed gravitational disruptors, technology the Hegemony believed was still theoretical. The weapons didn't target the Ardonian ships directly but warped spacetime around them, creating micro-singularities that tore at their hulls. Within minutes, the Ardonian warship was crippled, its systems failing as the strange weapons bypassed their shields entirely. The diplomatic vessel surrendered immediately. News of the encounter spread rapidly through subspace communications. A minor backward species had not only stood against the Hegemony, but had defeated them using technology the Ardonians didn't understand. It was unprecedented. In the Resistance headquarters, hidden on a rogue planet drifting between star systems, Commander Ilara of the Centauri studied the reports with growing hope. Could it be true? She asked her intelligence officer. The humans actually defeated an Ardonian warship. "The reports are confirmed," the officer replied. "And there's more. Our refugees report that Earth's military capacity is far beyond what they've shown the galaxy. They've been developing independently, incorporating technology from dozens of species, but implementing it in ways we've never considered." Ilara's face showed cautious optimism for the first time in years. "They've been planning for this, watching, learning from our mistakes." "There's something else," the officer added. "The Eridani scientists who took refuge on Earth report that humans possess something unique, their adaptability. While other species specialize, humans generalize. Their military doctrine, their approach to technology, even their biology. They're built to adapt to changing circumstances in ways the Ardonians can't predict." On the Ardonian homeworld, the Hegemony Council convened an emergency session. The loss of a warship to a supposedly primitive species was concerning, but not yet a crisis. Still, precautions had to be taken. "Send the 7th Fleet to the Sol system," ordered Supreme Commander Vortax. "This human resistance must be crushed immediately, before others take inspiration from it." The council member representing the Science Directorate raised a cautionary hand. "The humans displayed technology we haven't encountered before. Perhaps we should study them further before committing to a full-scale assault. One lucky engagement does not make them a threat." Vortax dismissed. "They caught a single ship by surprise with an experimental weapon. Against the full might of a proper fleet, they will crumble like all the others." The 7th Fleet, 200 warships, including 5 dreadnoughts, departed for the Sol system the following day. It was the largest single force the Hegemony had deployed against any species in decades, a testament to the shock caused by the initial defeat. They arrived at the edge of the solar system 1 week later, emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons already charged. But the Sol system appeared empty. No Earth fleet challenged them. No defensive platforms orbited the outer planets. Scans showed normal activity on Earth itself, but no significant military presence. "A trick," Vortax concluded, having personally taken command of the fleet. "They're hiding again." "Or they fled," suggested his tactical officer. "Perhaps they realized they couldn't stand against our true power." "Proceed to Earth," Vortax ordered. "Full combat formation." As the Hegemony fleet passed Neptune's orbit, humanity revealed its second surprise. The supposedly empty space around them suddenly ignited with energy as hundreds of mines, quantum locked to be undetectable until activated, detonated simultaneously. 30 Ardonian ships were destroyed in the initial blast. Before the Hegemony could regroup, Earth's fleet appeared, not 30 ships this time, but 300, emerging from hiding positions within the rings of Saturn and the atmosphere of Jupiter, places the Ardonians had dismissed as too hostile for bases. The battle that followed would later be known as Neptune's Fury. Earth vessels, smaller and more maneuverable than their Ardonian counterparts, swarmed the Hegemony ships in coordinated attack patterns that seemed chaotic, but revealed themselves as precisely calculated. Human weapons targeted specific vulnerabilities in Ardonian design that no other species had exploited before. Most shocking to the Hegemony forces were the human pilots themselves. While Ardonian ships were controlled by crews working in perfect, hierarchical precision, the humans fought with a blend of discipline and individual initiative that made their movements unpredictable. When standard tactics failed, they improvised, something the rigid Ardonian command structure couldn't match. By the time Vortax ordered a retreat, the Seventh Fleet had lost over half its ships. The remainder limped back to Ardonian space, carrying news that would send shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The humans weren't just resistant to the Hegemony. They were genuinely dangerous. As the surviving Ardonian ships fled the solar system, President Karim addressed the United Nations General Assembly on Earth. "Today, humanity has revealed itself to the galaxy," he declared. "For too long, we've watched as the Ardonian Hegemony has subjugated free worlds and crushed independent species. We studied their tactics, their technology, their weaknesses, all while presenting ourselves as a primitive, non-threatening species. That deception ends today." The assembly erupted in applause. "We are not conquerors," Karim continued once the noise subsided. "We have no desire to build an empire of our own. But we will no longer stand idle while others suffer under tyranny. Earth now officially joins the resistance, and we bring with us not just our technology and our ships, but our greatest strength, humanity's indomitable spirit." Across the galaxy, as news of the Hegemony's defeat spread, something long dormant began to stir in subjugated worlds. Hope. The turning tide. The Ardonian Hegemony had never known defeat. For 3 centuries, their expansion had been relentless, methodical, and unstoppable. The appearance of humanity as a genuine military threat sent ripples of confusion through their empire. Supreme Commander Vortax, having survived the debacle at Neptune, faced the Hegemony Council with unusual humility. "The humans are not what we believed," he admitted. "Their technological development exceeds our intelligence estimates by at least 70 years. Their military doctrine is unlike anything we've encountered." The council chamber, normally a place of cold efficiency, buzzed with unsettled murmurs. "How did we miss this?" demanded the head counselor. "How did an entire species develop advanced military technology without our knowledge?" The intelligence director stepped forward. "They deceived us deliberately. For decades, they'd presented a carefully constructed image of technological backwardness. The ships they sent beyond their system were outdated by design. The technologies they traded were rudimentary. Meanwhile, they were absorbing knowledge from every species they encountered, adapting it, improving it." "What makes them different?" asked another counselor. "Why have they succeeded where the resistance failed?" The science director, who had counseled caution before the Neptune disaster, activated a holographic display. Humans possess several unique qualities. First, their adaptability. They evolved on a planet with rapidly changing conditions, making flexibility integral to their survival. Second, their decentralized thinking, where Ardonians excel at perfect execution of established protocols. Humans excel at improvisation. "Primitive characteristics," scoffed Vortax. "Useful in a single battle, perhaps, but not in a prolonged war." "I disagree," the science director countered. "There's a third factor, their psychology. Humans become more determined when faced with overwhelming odds. Their historical records show this repeatedly. When defeat seems certain, they fight harder, not less. On Earth, the United Nations Space Command had become the center of a rapidly forming galactic alliance. Representatives from 17 formerly resistant species gathered in the newly constructed Galactic Cooperation Center in Geneva. Commander Ilara of the Centauri, now Earth's primary ally, addressed the assembly. For 30 years, the resistance fought bravely, but failed to stop the Hegemony's advance. In just 1 month since Earth officially entered the conflict, we've successfully defended 3 systems and liberated 1. This is not coincidence. It is the result of humanity's approach to warfare. She gestured to General Chen, who activated a strategic display. The Hegemony has always relied on overwhelming force, Chen explained. Their strategy is to deploy superior numbers with superior technology in conventional engagements. It's effective against enemies who fight on their terms. We don't. The display showed simulations of recent battles, highlighting the differences in approach. Asymmetric warfare, Chen continued. Hit-and-run tactics. Guerrilla operations. The Ardonians call these approaches primitive, but they're simply different. We target supply lines instead of fleets. We disable communication networks instead of engaging planetary defenses. We use the Hegemony's rigid command structure against them. A Tellarate representative raised a hand. But eventually, they'll adapt to these tactics. Of course they will, Chen agreed. Which is why we constantly change our approach. The Hegemony's greatest weakness is their predictability. They excel at executing perfect plans, but struggle when those plans are disrupted. Over the following months, the newly formed Earth Alliance demonstrated this philosophy in action. Instead of reclaiming conquered worlds directly, human-led forces targeted the Hegemony's infrastructure, hyperspace beacons, supply depots, and communication hubs. As Ardonian forces rushed to defend these critical points, Alliance ships would strike elsewhere, creating a perpetual state of confusion. The Hegemony responded by deploying larger fleets, following their doctrine of overwhelming force. But this only spread their resources thinner, making them more vulnerable to the Alliance's precision strikes. 6 months after Earth's entry into the war, the struggle reached a critical point at Nexus Prime, a strategic intersection of hyperspace lanes that connected 17 systems. Whoever controlled Nexus Prime effectively controlled movement throughout the sector. The Hegemony, recognizing its importance, deployed a massive defense fleet, 300 ships, including 7 dreadnoughts, supported by orbital platforms, and a planetary shield generator. It's impossible to take through conventional means, Admiral Jackson admitted during the Alliance War Council. Even with our combined forces, a direct assault would result in unacceptable casualties. Then we don't use conventional means, suggested Captain Marcus Reed, commander of the Earth vessel Defiance. The Ardonians expect us to either hit hard or stay away. Let's do neither. Reed's plan was audacious. Instead of attacking the Hegemony fleet, the Alliance would make it appear as if they were preparing to strike elsewhere, the Ardonian core worlds themselves. A small force would be detected approaching Ardonia, seemingly using a new stealth technology. The ruse worked. Panicked by the thought of an attack on their homeworld, the Hegemony redeployed 2/3 of the Nexus Prime fleet. When they discovered the approaching force was merely a decoy, automated ships broadcasting false signatures, it was too late. The Alliance had seized Nexus Prime with minimal resistance. This victory marked a psychological turning point in the war. Across the galaxy, subjugated species who had accepted Ardonian rule as inevitable began to question their overlords' invincibility. Resistance cells that had been dormant for years reactivated. Worlds that had been loyal through fear began to waver. The Hegemony Council, once confident in their eventual triumph, now faced an uncomfortable reality. They were losing the war. "We must negotiate," urged the Commerce Director. "Offer the humans a favorable settlement before we lose more territory." Negotiate with primitives. Vortax was incredulous. One defeat does not end a war. "It's not one defeat," countered the intelligence director. "We've lost 27 engagements in the past 6 months. The Alliance gains strength while we weaken. Most concerning are the reports from our subject worlds. They no longer believe in our inevitability." "Then we must show them our true power," Vortax declared. "Assemble the Grand Fleet. All available ships, all reserve forces. We will crush this human alliance in one decisive battle." The Grand Fleet of the Ardonian Hegemony was a sight few in the galaxy had ever witnessed. Over 1,000 warships, gathered in a single massive formation. It represented the combined military might of an empire spanning thousands of worlds. Against conventional enemies, it would have been an unstoppable force. Intelligence about the Grand Fleet's assembly reached Earth quickly. The Alliance had anticipated this move, the commitment of the Hegemony's full military might to a single decisive engagement. "They're returning to Nexus Prime," confirmed Alliance intelligence. "They intend to reclaim it and destroy our forces in the process." In the Alliance Command Center, the mood was somber but determined. This would be the largest space battle in the galaxy's recorded history. "We should evacuate Nexus Prime," suggested one of the alien commanders. "We can't match their numbers." "No," President Karim responded firmly. "If we retreat, we lose everything we've gained, not just territory, but momentum. The galaxy is watching. This battle will decide whether others join our cause or surrender to fear." "We don't need to match their numbers," Admiral Jackson added. "We just need to break their belief in their own invincibility." The plan they developed was quintessentially human, complex, multi-layered, and defying conventional military doctrine. While the main Alliance fleet would engage the Hegemony forces at Nexus Prime, smaller task forces would simultaneously strike lightly defended Ardonian worlds, not to occupy them, but to demonstrate that even at its moment of greatest strength, the Hegemony couldn't protect its own territory. When the Grand Fleet arrived at Nexus Prime, they found the Alliance waiting. The battle began conventionally enough. Massive formations exchanging fire at long range, exactly the type of engagement where Ardonian numerical superiority should prevail. But 3 hours into the battle, the Hegemony commanders began receiving alarming reports from home. Alliance forces were attacking Ardonian supply worlds, shipyards, and even outlying colonies. The supposedly weaker enemy was somehow fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. Supreme Commander Vortax faced an impossible choice: continue the battle at Nexus Prime, or divide his forces to defend Ardonian territory. Both options meant defeat. The moment he split his fleet, he would lose the advantage of concentration. If he didn't, the Alliance would cause incalculable damage to the Hegemony's infrastructure. What the Ardonians failed to understand was that this was the essence of human warfare, creating no-win scenarios for their enemies, forcing them to choose between equally undesirable outcomes. As the battle raged on, the Alliance executed the final phase of their plan. Specially modified ships, each carrying a quantum displacement device, a weapon so new the Hegemony had no defense against it, targeted the flagship dreadnoughts. These weapons didn't destroy the Ardonian vessels, but instead severed their command networks, throwing their rigidly hierarchical forces into confusion. Without clear leadership, the perfectly coordinated Ardonian formations began to falter. Individual captains, unaccustomed to acting without direct orders, made contradictory decisions. Some pressed the attack. Others withdrew to defensive positions. The unified Grand Fleet became a collection of ships working at cross purposes. Sensing the change, Alliance forces pressed their advantage. They targeted command ships, communication arrays, and coordination centers, not to destroy the Hegemony fleet, but to disorganize it. By the battle's 18th hour, the once mighty Grand Fleet was in retreat, not because it had been outfought, but because it had been outthought. The Ardonians had lost fewer ships than the Alliance, but had lost something far more valuable: the myth of their invincibility. 1 month later, representatives of the Ardonian Hegemony arrived on Earth, not as conquerors, but as diplomats seeking terms. The war that had raged for decades was ending, not with the annihilation of either side, but with the recognition of a new reality. In the United Nations General Assembly, now expanded to include representatives from 87 alien species, President Karim addressed the gathered delegates as the peace treaty was signed. Today marks not the triumph of one species over another, but the beginning of a new understanding, he declared. The Ardonians built their empire on the belief that uniformity brings strength, that rigid hierarchy and absolute control were the path to security. Humanity showed the galaxy a different truth, that diversity brings resilience, that adaptation overcomes strength, and that freedom inspires greater courage than fear. Across the galaxy, newly liberated worlds celebrated. The hegemony, while not destroyed, was transformed, forced by the terms of peace to recognize the sovereignty of its former subjects and to dismantle its military occupation of unwilling worlds. On the observation deck of the Prometheus, Admiral Jackson stood with Commander Ilara, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath them. "I still don't understand," Ilara admitted. "How did you know you could win?" The Ardonians had everything. More ships, more resources, more territory. Jackson smiled. "Throughout our history, humanity has faced overwhelming odds. We've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and our own self-destructive tendencies. We nearly destroyed ourselves more than once, but each time we adapted, learned, and grew stronger." She pointed to the planet below. "Look at Earth, a single world that produced thousands of different cultures, languages, and perspectives. We argued, competed, sometimes fought each other, but that diversity became our strength. When the Ardonians encountered something unexpected, they tried to force it into their existing paradigm. When humans encounter something new, we change our paradigm. You knew you would win because you'd already survived yourselves," Ilara realized. Exactly. The Ardonians never understood what they were fighting. They thought they were facing just another species. Instead, they faced the distilled essence of humanity's greatest quality, our relentless determination to overcome, no matter the odds. As night fell across Earth, citizens looked to the stars with new perspective. The galaxy had changed forever, not because humanity had conquered it, but because they had shown it a different way, a path where diversity brought strength, adaptation ensured survival, and the human spirit remained unconquered. When Earth finally joined the war, the galaxy's fate was indeed sealed, not with destruction, but with liberation.